Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. Rocky and I are here today to talk about Clear number 5 and 6. If you listened to or watched our other episode on the last couple of issues of Night of the Ghoul, this will be familiar. Fast forward if you want. But yeah, we realized as the second wave of Best Jacket books are about to drop this Tuesday, the Tuesday before San Diego Comic-Con, July 19th, we never finished up Clear and Night of the Ghoul. We finished up We Have Demons, but we never finished our reviews. And these books are so awesome. These series are so great. They definitely need to be completed. So go back in the podcast feed or go back on Rocky's channel and you can find reviews for Night of the Ghoul 1 through 4, Clear 1 through 4. We're going to talk about Clear 5 and 6 on this episode. What do you think, Rocky? Did it finish satisfactorily for you?
It did. It really did. These issues 5 and 6, it was deeply satisfying. One thing that Scott Snyder continues to do so well here, he did it with Night of the Ghoul. His character work, I mean, it's a horror story with great character work. Who'd have thunk? And this Clear, dealing about a sort of a future dystopian future where, you know, there's these black veils where people essentially live in a world of their choosing, basically through their iPhones and everyone's escaping. We're just like we in our world. We escape ourselves into our iPhones, or we escape by watching too much TV, we're always on our iPhones. Imagine literally being in another virtual world that surrounds our senses all the time. This veil, these black veils, and the character work in Clear is so great. This Detective Nunes, who lost his son Baxter, and whose wife Kendra is a very intelligent scientist who creates this ultimate veil, and who ends up being, the central gist of the story is that his wife Kendra is killed, and she works for the Department of Clarity, I think it is, and she
Connectivity.
That's right, the Department of Connectivity, right, and it's her job basically to focus on, not all of society is sort of swallowed up by these veils, and so but it's very, very addictive, and just the themes in this story are so powerful about clarity, about what do you focus on in your life. You can escape. We all want to escape our pain, and for Detective Nunes, the greatest pain in his life was the loss of his son Baxter, and he can get back his son. He can, if he takes a veil, and it's of course it's not real. It's just imaginary. It's through a veil, but it's that choice you make. Do you live with your pain? To what extent does pain define us? How should you escape it? And what's the cost that you make escaping? I mean, part of being human is how we deal with our pain and the ups and downs. Life isn't fair. But if you're always constantly escaping your life, by escaping it, going into a veil, what happens to reality? What happens to real life? And those central questions are so powerful. And the way that this story ends was so powerful to me, because the world has a reckoning. It has a reckoning at the end here that I think is perfect, and it's poetic justice for a world that allows itself to get too caught up in the veil, too caught up in the fantasy. What happens when you suddenly have to learn to live in reality again and the veils are gone? And so that's the question that leaves us at the end of this series. But getting there, the character work, the loss, the tragedy, the hope, the love, the betrayal, and it's very powerful. And the fantastic art by Francis Manupal. Favorite cover of this series, on cover of issue 5. The character called the Widow was on this cover. Absolutely beautiful. Francis Manupal's art is just incredible. The colors, the shading, the character work, I love his use of the bright lights, and you get multiple different variations of different scenes of pretty much every time period, because with the veil, every person has a different fantasy, and your fantasy can be whatever you want it to be. So literally the fantasy can basically take take a person anywhere, and through various scenes throughout this 6 issue series, you get all kinds of different ways in which Francis Manupal gets to show off his art and his show off his talents. And I don't know. The theme, it really was impactful for me. And there's some moments here that I thought were, I even got somewhat emotional. I never shed a tear reading this, but there were moments that tugged at my heart. So what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, the way this ends, you may not be familiar with this quote, being Canadian, but if you're most Americans will know this quote. It's from Thomas Jefferson, and the quote is, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." And when I read this, and it comes to the end, and it's clear a revolution is coming, in a different way from the American Revolution. But that's all I could think, right? It's going to be some growing pains. It's going to be some bloodshed. But it's all about liberty, right? And giving people the option to live free. Because really, what has happened here is people have chosen through very interesting and very nuanced world building from both Snyder and Manupal. We see not just character development for Detective Doones and his wife and his family, but really character building for society as a whole, for these sort of self-imposed imprisonment that they've chosen, right? They really have chosen this prison, and maybe the prison is, a wonderful thing to be in. It's got velvet couches, and the climate is nice and what have you, but it's a prison nonetheless, a prison of their own choosing. But society has stagnated, right? I mean, another one of the best lines, maybe my favorite line. There's two lines that I loved, and one we'll talk about. It's at the end of issue 5, where Dune says, "I'm the fire," and we'll talk about the significance of that in a little bit. But in issue 2, where Doones is talking about the war, the Red War, and how basically the U.S. became sort of isolationist, and how things started sliding toward this future that they currently live in, where everybody lives in a reality that's their own. And we've talked before about how it's so interesting because technology is supposed to bring us close together and has made the world smaller. But when the pendulum swings too far, now it's got to the point where it's actually isolating people. You could be sitting right next to somebody, standing right next to somebody, walking down the street right next to somebody, and you're not even seeing the same things that they're seeing, because you perceive the world differently because you have different veils. So now there's no common ground. There's no connectivity. Instead of bringing people together, technology is actually isolating people. But when we're talking about the state of the world, and Doones is talking about, we expected it to be this big war or this big apocalypse or this big Armageddon, and it was going to be big and catastrophic. But what if instead of that, the world just kind of ended and became dystopian with a shrug? Like, what's worse, right? Like caring so much, caring not at all. Like caring so much and not being able to stop something bad from happening. Or, it's kind of like when you look at social media, well, all these people that get fired up, and it's been shown time and time again that people will be more likely to respond to something that angers them rather than something that makes them happy, right? But either way, it's attention, right? Like if you're posting on something on social media, there are those out there who want to be influencers, and they'll post something that they think people will like, and that will get their followers, a lot of joy and happiness, or they'll post things that are provocative to get people fired up and get engagement. But either way, they're getting attention. Either way, that's what they want. They can sell their influence. But what's the worst for those people is to just ignore them, right? To not even care, to not even matter. You matter so much, I'm not going to respond at all. Or you matter so little, I'm not going to respond at all, right? So that was one of the great lines that I had forgotten, actually, when I went back and reread this. Yeah, what if the world ended with a shrug? Like, what if nobody cared? That's the word.
Is very powerful, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Excellent, because Snyder nails those moments with the words and the vocabulary, and he also, and in the same way, Francis Manupal nails it with the visual imagery. And I know here on the cover of issue 6, there's the bloody hand on the right side Nunez's face, and the blood is actually from his wife Kendra, who touches his face, and it's that same bloody hand that on the first issue, the cover of the first issue, it's a bloody hand that's on his helmet, and I can't help but to think that there's a metaphor there for something that there's initially he has a helmet on and he's wearing a mask and he's got the bloody hand on the mask and it has the image and this same bloody and a different kind of bloody hand, of course, of that of his wife Kendra, is on the side of his face here in the sixth issue about how important it is, that once you take off the mask, you can't escape reality. At some point, you have to deal with reality, and it's a stark reminder of the cost that Nunez paid here at the loss of his ex-wife Kendra, who he thought was initially dead to begin with. I mean, this was essentially a murder mystery in the future, but that the discovery that in fact she was alive and was moving to essentially eliminate the black veil, to tear it all down herself, and was hoping that Nunez would make the same decision she did, all inspired by their son Baxter, Baxter's final act before the car accident that ultimately took his life was that Baxter himself, their son was trying to take down a veil without success. And it's just kind of gut wrenching, and you feel the pain of the characters even now as you read it. And the character work is so great, and with the loss of Kendra, and this is a character that we discover in this issue she's still alive, but we've already felt her loss in earlier issues, and then for her to be revealed to be alive in this issue, and we lose her again, it was a double whammy, and done so effectively well, so well by Snyder, and that the sense of that loss was magnified by Manupal with the bright red hair and the blood of the bloody hand on the side of the face. It just really, really worked. Very impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, I always took that to be with those hands, and this is like one of my number one questions, conversation I want to have with Scott about this series. It's almost like see no evil, right? Like you're going to put your hands over your eyes because you don't want to see the world as it is. And so that's the symbology that's what Dunes is putting on his helmet, but yet he sees through that, even though that's why he keeps his setting on clear. So let's do a quick recap of the first 4 issues in case you don't remember. So yeah, we mentioned the first issue. We get introduced to the world. Everybody has a chance to skin the world as they would want and see through their own veils. There are a couple things that are outlawed. You can't have shared veils, so you can't look at a veil that you then share with somebody else. And then there are other certain veils that you're not supposed to have either, and they're all called black market veils. They're not supposed to be there. Now, in the second issue, after Kendra apparently commits suicide by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, she sends a gift to Detective Dunes, and it's a watch that he gifted her after their son had died, and he never heard back. He knows that he said, I expected one of two things. She was going to send it back out of hate, or she was going to reach out to me and thank me, and there was going to be reconciliation. Instead, he knows that she accepted it, but nothing happened. But on the back of the watch, when he takes it out of the box, it says, I was murdered. So that sends Dunes, who used to be a police officer, in search of who killed her, right? And we find out that she works for the Department of Connectivity, and there apparently are these rumors of these yellow-eyed men who are outside the system and can manipulate veils and whatnot. So then Dunes goes to this group called the 1518. They're kind of these rebellious people who believe that veils should be able to be shared. And he learns that, yes, Kendra did come to them, but they're not the ones that killed her, but that Kendra came to them, and she wanted to create a shared veil, which is against her job, right? Department of Connectivities has this department where they go and stamp out people selling black market veils, shared veils. But she wanted to make a shared veil that was so big that it would bring down the whole system. And the only way to get that uploaded into the system would be to have it modified by this person called the Widow. She's the only one that has the technological skill to do that. The 1518 group doesn't. So Dunes doesn't necessarily believe them. So he goes and talks to somebody else, this criminal that he had an engagement with in the first issue. Alka 10 is his name. And we learn that Dune, even though Dunes sees the world on clear all the time without any settings, he wants to see the world as it is and keep his wits about him, that he did succumb at one point when after the son had died, and we see the how that happened involved a veil that Kendra was working on. That he did give in and went to Alka and asked for a black veil, and it was basically, what would the world be? Let me see the world as it would be if my son hadn't died. And it was at that moment that he was experiencing that black veil that Kendra came to him. And this is revealed in issue 5. It came to him, and here she is fighting against black veils and thinks that Dunes will always be one that will always want to see the world as it actually is. But when she goes to see him, she sees him using a black veil and sees him happy for the first time since their son died. So that's kind of a crisis of faith for her. So that's what Dunes realizes at the end of issue 4, and it's kind of an aha moment for him, and he realizes what happened with Kendra. Right? She went to the 1518. She asked for an introduction to the widow. They said, we'll never introduce you to the widow because you are an agent of the DOC, Department of Connectivity, and those are the people that want widow captured and stopped. And it'll never happen. But she went and jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge anyway, in the hopes that the widow would have mercy and pick her up. So when Dunes does that at the end of issue 4, you don't know why. Well, come to find out, the widow's headquarters, if you will, her base of operations, is a submarine that's like driving around the Bay of San Francisco. So he does manage to get picked up in the beginning of issue 5. He meets the widow. She explains a lot of this stuff to him. It's really great. It's a little expositional heavy, this particular issue, but it explains everything that's going on, like all the mystery. It really pulls a lot of the threads together. And Dunes makes this realization that, yes, Kendra was going against what she was actually supposed to be doing with her job. She decided at that moment when she saw Baxter or saw Dunes using the veil Baxter, which was the name of their son. That's what they named the veil that allowed Baxter to still be alive, or them to see the world as though he was still alive. She decided she was going to upload that so that everybody would experience that world. And the widow refused to do it. And so Dunes is asking her once again to do it. And she goes through and she's talking about, there's this analogy with where she got her name, the spider. And she talks about when she had a small child and how spiders, if a shoe comes and steps on a spider, that's something like sort of like an act of God or an act of fate, where the spider won't even know what's happening. And even if you were to explain to the spider what a shoe is, that just opens up this Pandora's box. Then you have to explain, like, people wear shoes, and then it keeps expanding and expanding. And it's this idea of ignorance is bliss, and which then goes back to tie into this idea of, hey, I want to see the world through a veil so I can see it as I want to see it instead of dealing with reality. And that's really at the end of the day, what the series is kind of about, right? Like, are you going to grow up and put your big boy pants on and actually deal with reality? Or are you just going to stick your head in the sand and pretend everything's hunky dory? Right. So through this conversation with Dunes, the widow changes her mind, basically. She was never going to do this for Kendra, but she changes her mind and agrees to do it. So before she gives Detective Dunes the little microchip with the Baxter veil all set up so that it can be uploaded into the server farm and be disseminated out everywhere, which will crash the system, and then, because it's too big, and allow everybody to see the world as it really is, she tells Dunes, you need to see the world as it really is. And now Dunes thinks that he does. He doesn't use a veil. He's set on clear all the time. But come to find out, clear is a veil as well. And the world is in much worse shape than even he thought. And all these WXR robots that are supposedly, they do all the manual labor that nobody wants to do and blah, blah, blah. They're not even robots. They're actually people. They're indentured servants. They're immigrants. They're, the poorest of the poor, people that are exploited. And even if they try to talk or do something to try to free themselves, it all gets covered up by the veil. And so they go along with their horrible existence, hoping at some point to earn enough credit that they can be released into this uh, supposed, like kind of like a dog that dies. You say, "Oh, I went to the farm in the country." They get to go to Alaska, and the widow says, "I don't even know. I don't even know if this is true or not. Maybe they do, maybe not." So what's interesting is that Dunes asks. He goes, "So why are you doing this now? You didn't, you weren't willing to do it before. Why are you? Do you want to crash the system now? You make veils. You're the biggest marketer of black market veils in the world, the biggest supplier. Why would you want to do this? Why would you want to? You rely on this world." And it's great what she says. She goes, "You know what? Black widows eat their mate for no reason at all. So, maybe it's just time." Um, but he needs to get it into the server, and it's like the most heavily guarded place in the world, one of these server farms. But he did have a relationship with a client earlier, um, who does have a chance to possibly have access because her husband owns the server farm. And so he calls her, and again, this is like one of the best moments in the entire series. He calls her, Petal Matter is her name, and he calls her, and he's thinking back to the joke. The joke is the other thing that I would really want to talk to Scott about, because again, it's such a great metaphor for the series. The joke that his son was telling to Sam Dunes and Kendra in the car right before he died. Um, there's all these characters in the joke. There's the doctor who's in charge of this mental institution. There's all the mental patients, and there's the watch. And at various times throughout the story, and this goes along with the character's character arc that Manupal and Snyder take Dunes on. At various times, he's identified with different things. The doctor, the patients, maybe even the watch itself. And then he realizes, as everything is coming to a climax here, because he wasn't the doctor, he wasn't the lunatics in the asylum, he wasn't the watch like he thought he was. He's the fire. He's gonna burn it all down. I love that. It's like my favorite line in the entire series. He's gonna bring this whole terrible system down around everybody's ears. So that's where issue 5 ends, and then issue 6 starts. He's got a veil on that makes him look like Petal's husband, who's Mr. Matter, and so they go up there and they go to load it, but unfortunately Quentin Matter is waiting there for him. Knew he was coming, and has his yellow-eyed man up there helping him. Kills Petal, and then shoots Dunes and is kind of torturing him, saying, "Give me the chip. You never get away with it. I told all the WXR robots in here to tear you limb from limb." Now we know they're not actually robots; they're actually people. But when the yellow-eyed man shows up there, and Dunes is kind of at the mercy of Quentin, we find out, as Rocky alluded to earlier, that the yellow-eyed man is actually Kendra all along. She didn't die. It was a fake out to find a way to get to the widow, actually. And Kendra, as I said, she's had this crisis of conscience, and she said she's just tired of being in pain. She's tired of the pain of losing her child, and it really resonated with her. She was fighting against the system, trying to take down black veils, trying to make everybody see the world as it was, and it felt futile to her, because even Detective Dunes, this self-professed, I always want to see the world as it is, I don't want to lie to myself, this man of integrity and honesty, even he succumbed and seemed happy when he was experiencing the Baxter veil. And so she says, "Yeah, let's do it." And Quentin's like, "Yeah, you gave me the widow. You allowed me to find the widow herself. So I'm going to make good on my debts, and I'm going to allow you and Kendra to go, live your life out in happiness, living with this life through this veil of your son being alive." But Quentin says no. He's a moment of weakness. Yes, he did, but he says he realized that even at that moment where Baxter died, even at that moment, he was trying to turn the veil off. He didn't want it. He said, this is not what Baxter would want. Baxter would not want us to live this fake life pretending like he was still alive. So, if you're going to kill me, kill me. And Kendra has a change of heart at that moment. And she tells Dunes as so she has a change of heart. She shoots Quentin. Quentin shoots her. They're both lying there dying. And this was maybe the only moment where it's not that I didn't like it, but I don't know if it really works as well as it could. She says it was really a double cross all along. She was just pretending to go along with Quentin. She never really was going to go along with Quentin, but she thought this was the only way to get in the server farm, and she knew Dunes would be there. It all seems a little too coincidental. I think more likely she's trying to save face, but at the end here, and that she did kind of flip flop. She did
Yeah. I got a
want
little bit of
to.
that sense as well, a little bit of flip flopping
Yeah,
maybe, but it at the same time, yeah, I want her to be sincere because I don't want Dunes to feel pain because I feel so sorry for him. Yeah,
yeah,
he lost Baxter, now he's lost the mother of his son, so you just feel for the main character.
yeah. I mean, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Like, it's almost like with Dunes staring death right in the face and still saying, "This is not what Baxter would want, Quentin." Or Kendra, this is not what Baxter would want. Quentin, go ahead and kill me. It's almost like she then it kind of brings her back to how she thought Dunes was to begin with. It's yes, he had that moment of weakness where he used the veil, but she was actually right about him, that he does want to see the world, even knowing now that the world's even worse off than they thought. Right, that it's not robots. So it's almost like Kendra. Yeah, she did kind of flip. She did waver, but in the end, she's redeemed as well. And I love that you mentioned that the cover of 6 with the bloody handprint, because I mentioned putting those handprints right on the mask, and he's see no evil, trying to hide, but he still sees through that. That's the metaphor, at least for me, that where Dunes is still trying to see through. But in the end, here in the final issue, the handprint is still there, but it's not even covering his eye. And that's what I love. It's off to the side. So yeah, those hands have been removed. So you don't even have to pretend anymore. This is the world as it really is. So as she dies, Dunes goes to put the little chip into the server, and Quentin is still alive, and he yells to all the WXR robots, these that are actually people, stop him, uh, don't let him do that. And instead, all these people come and they subdue him. And as Dunes holds Kendra, cradles her as she lives her last moments, and he says he hears the sounds of bones breaking and flesh tearing, and really it's these people that have been living as slaves their whole life getting some cathartic release. And then he goes and he sticks the chip in, and it very much does crash the system, and people have to view the world as it really is for the first time. And it goes back to that joke in the beginning, right? Um, and the joke has to do with again a fire approaching this insane asylum. There's 3 buildings. The doctor goes to the first building and tells a writer, an artist, and a musician, "Here's the keys. Let everybody else out in this building get down to the bottom floor to the docks, and we'll get in the boat and escape the fire." While he goes and gets people out of the second and third building, everybody from the second and third building is in the boat at the end, and they look up and they see all the patients on the top floor of the first building instead of coming down to the boat, and they're watching a play that was written by the writer, with imagined backdrops from the artist and an imagined musical score from the musician, and they're all watching this and happier than the doctor has ever seen them while they burn, right? And obviously it's very much a metaphor for this world that these people live in, the world of Clear, where the world around them is burning, but these people are living their lives in these veils and don't even realize how bad it is out there. But they're about to find out because Dunes has crashed the entire system. So very much man against the world story in a way. And I love that it ends with no epilogue, with no hints of whatever might be to come. And also, much like we said with Night of the Ghoul, a complete story. And as much as I love this, like I love this so much, this might be my favorite thing that Scott Snyder's ever done. I don't think I would want to see him come back to the world of Clear. I love this as a self-contained story. I think it says everything it needs to say,
Yeah.
and it's I think it's perfect as it is. And what I will say about the character work is the character work in this is so nuanced that it's almost invisible. There is character work there. There is an evolution, um, and certainly when you bring in the flashbacks from who Dunes was before his son died to the beautiful compilation montage page by Manupal, I think it was in issue 2, where we see Dunes getting fired from the police department and spiraling into drinking too much, and the breakup of him and Kendra. So there is, character growth, but it's so in the background behind the action and the actual setting here. It's so nuanced that, if you're not looking for it, you can miss it, and it becomes subtextual, which then makes the series and story work even better. So, I will buy the individual issues of this. I will buy the trade. I will buy the hardcover. Like, I just want this in some sort of physical form. It's so fantastic. So, what do you have to add, Rocky?
The final moments between Dunes and Kendra, I thought were extremely touching. Where, I mean, she's basically dying, sacrificing herself, for at least one interpretation. She's dying, and she's had an about face. The Baxter Veil, as it's called, is going to be released, and the world's going to wake up to what reality is really like. And as she's dying in Dune's arms, he's saying, please let me back into one of those moments. Any of them. Let me live them with her. Let me live in those moments forever with her. He doesn't want her to die. He wants to relive his life with her, but he can't. But he actually could. He could veil himself and keep her alive inside his mind forever, but he doesn't. That's part of the sacrifice he knows needs to be done, and so that's what makes her passing all the more heartfelt. But it makes the memory of her. He's cherishing his final moments with her, and the thing is, the horror element of the veil is that you never need to remember it. You don't need memories, because the veil, you can relive a memory and keep it permanent forever. That's sort of how the veil sucks you in. All your precious memories, you can live forever. And that's part of what, you can avoid pain, but pain is the point. The Buddhists say, life is suffering. Life isn't fair, but that's also what makes it kind of exciting. And the veil takes that away. And, one of the powerful things that Kendra says to him, she says, remember when Baxter was born? And she confesses that I was scared. I've never been more scared in my life than when Baxter was born. And he said, me neither. And she says to him, it's good to be scared. It's the best. So go scare them. Meaning, let the world know fear. Go scare them. Wake them up. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to have fear, because that's life. You can't avoid fear all the time by living a fantasy. That's not what life's about. And there's such a powerful message there. And, let's face it, we're living in, there's so many obvious metaphors here to the time we're living in now. So many people are escaping their real life and things online and what have you. And, this is definitely a dystopian future story that has such a powerful message. And ultimately, it's grounded in love and sacrifice and family, a husband, a wife, and a child. And with great loss, but with a promise of a new tomorrow, but also a promise of a tomorrow that's going to involve a great deal of sacrifice and some fear, and being scared and facing those fears, but hopefully toward a better tomorrow, so that we can all get more clear, hence the title. So kudos to Snyder. Fantastic art by Manupal. This was, this is absolutely, talking with it, I like this better than Night of the Ghoul. It's just, like I say, I'm a sucker for a good metaphor. I've said that so many times, and this is just ripe with them, and very well done. You're on mute. You're on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. And as we're winding up here, I will say the art by Manupal. I talk about this maybe being my favorite thing that Scott Snyder's ever done. There's no doubt it is my favorite thing that Francis Manupal's ever done. And I think part of the reason it works so well is because he got to do the color. He does all the color work as well. So, yeah, go and check it out. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
All right. And
Am I still coming through?
yeah, you're still coming through. Yeah, I can hear you.
Sorry, I have music playing for some reason.
Oh, only
There we
bit of
go.
soundtrack there. That's all right.
Sorry about that, everybody.
You
Don't
have to
know.
get clear. You have to get clear.
Yeah, don't know how that happened, but anyway, yeah, go and check out Clear. Remember, it's on Comixology Unlimited, so if you're $5.99 a month, you can get all these for free. If you have Amazon Prime, you can get it to read for free as well. Or they'll be in print from Dark Horse, I think, coming out pretty soon. Again, next wave of Best Jacket coming out the 19th, so we'll be reviewing those as well. Highest recommendation for this. Go check it out. So we appreciate the time, everybody. Thanks for joining us as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you later.